I was almost like taken to this new place, and I was communicating with the spirit of my mom, who wasn't the present day version of my mom. It was literally her like soul, her past, present, and future selves, like her essence. And it came to me in this moment that I was just sobbing and sobbing, and she told me that everything's going to be okay, and she said she wanted to show me something.
What's up, everyone? I'm Zach, your host of the AUXORO podcast, and today I sit down with Manoa Raine. Manoa is a videographer, photographer, editor, and friend. He's worked with companies like Spartan Race and Grubhub, to name a couple. And today we get into a lot. We talk about LSD, working with Jason Derulo, the skills that separate the best videographers, moving to LA in the middle of a pandemic, Lil Nas on TikTok, embracing your own weirdness, and more. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, and become a supporter on Patreon for $5 a month, which gets you access to bonus content and early releases of the podcast. Without further ado, please enjoy this deep dive with Manoa Raine. All right, I am here with Manoa Raine, and for listeners, you will probably guess by the way that this conversation goes that we've known each other for a little bit. We've known each other for about 2 years, both as friends and also professionally. So I thought for the basis of this conversation, since we're going to get into a lot of creative stuff that you do, let's start with the basics. How would you describe what it is that you do creatively? And could you give people a brief overview of the skill set you have and kind of the path that you've carved out for yourself creatively? Because you have literally carved out a path of work for yourself.
Oh man, that's such a big question. Where do I start?
It doesn't have to be a full history right away. It could be kind of the bullet points.
Well,
creatively.
I kind of do a little bit of everything. The beginning of my career was a lot of freelancing, doing like wedding videography and editing. And over the years, it's kind of evolved to working on product shoots, working on documentaries. And now since I moved from New York City to LA, it's now kind of transforming again into more of a producer and director role, where I'm kind of like building teams and coming up with a lot of the main creative and marketing aspects. And I kind of have experience doing a little bit of everything. And I started way back when I was like 15 years old. I actually became the lead sports photojournalist for my county's newspaper at 15, which is a very small county, Westmoreland County in Virginia. But that was a lot of fun, and that kind of showed me that I can make money with a camera and like being able to tell a good story. And it all kind of started from there.
What was the first specific piece of content you made? Do you remember what the assignment was and what that whole experience was like? Professionally or just in general? In general. Cool. The first piece of content beyond just filming for the sake of filming on your phone or from a camera, but something where you were purposefully and intentionally filming to turn into something, like some sort of project for yourself.
Yeah. I think that would be my first film, Oracle. I made that when I was 18 years old. I was a freshman going into JMU. I had no idea what I was doing, and no one else on the team did either. It's like everybody's first film, but we set out to do something ambitious. Like as freshmen, we decided we were going to make a 30-minute film, and which is literally insane. It's so hard to make something that's 5 minutes long that's good. And so it's not that great in terms of quality or whatever, but I think for what it was at the time, it was so cool and such an incredible experience. We actually got to premiere it at the college's theater in front of all of our friends and family. People kind of like traveled in, and it was an amazing time.
Yes, something that something that I've been realizing more and more during the pandemic. I've been trying to create more video content for myself, and TikTok was kind of the spark of that. And you mentioned how making this 5-minute video could be this entire thing, and the editing process and all the decisions and creative output that goes into this export that people see as this 5-minute project. And I'm still in the basic, bordering on intermediate stages of learning how to film and edit podcast stuff, so it's nothing super involved, but I'm learning these new things every day, whether it's different commands or things that I'm learning that can help do things more quickly, and like all these things that go into the process of videography and editing and putting out a final product that I had no idea coming into it as a podcaster from the audio end. And that's so much more basic, and when you add video into it, it's like, okay, now I have to give a shit about how this looks.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people really think that like, oh, these video guys, they just show up, they shoot things and they're done. But it's like, not only do you have to make things look good by knowing like how to light things properly, how to, angle things, how angles influence emotions and perceptions, but you also have to be good with the camera. You have to be good with audio mixing, adding sound effects to create life in your video. And you have to be a good storyteller. It's like, there are so many layers to making a good video. And I think that's why it's really hard and daunting. And, it's just very overwhelming at first, like you're saying. I mean, I've been doing this, I've been editing for like 10 years, like since I was a kid. And I'm still learning new stuff like every week. I'm like, holy crap, I could have been doing that the entire time. It's crazy.
Yeah. Are there any sort of broad stroke things that you learned early on that you remember completely changing the game for editing and filming? Something that even someone like myself or beginner videographer, something that once they realize, they'll be like, holy fuck, like I don't know how I went a year or two without doing this. This completely made things easier or more effective.
So I actually used to teach videography and photography, and this would always blow my students' minds, is the sequence of shooting a scene. And it's so simple, but you'll literally see it in every TV show and movie that you watch from now on. You usually start a new scene with a wide shot. It's introducing the space, you get a feeling of where you are, and then maybe you'll see the main characters at a distance. You can't really tell who they are. And then it's going to cut to that medium shot. It's going to show you more of the environment that we're in, solidifying that maybe we're in this room or this part of the mall or whatever. And it's going to introduce all of the characters. And then we cut to the close-ups of each character communicating. And then when we leave a scene, it can start doing the same thing, going from a close-up to a medium to a wide. And then there's camera movements that are all involved in that. Like something as simple as moving in kind of gives you the sense that you're getting closer to a character, that you're connecting with them more emotionally, whereas pushing out can show that you're disconnected, or maybe they're frustrated. Or if we move side to side, maybe they're thinking and their mind is changing, because we're not moving further or closer away, but now we're moving kind of left to right or right to left. One great example.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one great example of this, if you guys have watched The Dark Knight, which the Batman film.
Yes, I have a poster in my room of The Dark Knight.
It's literally one of the best movies ever. But there's a great scene where Batman and the Joker are having a conversation in a jail cell. And the Joker's camera is moving one direction. Batman's camera is actually moving the opposite direction. So there are opposing forces clashing against each other. But there's a line that the Joker says where he basically says that we're basically the same people. We're crazy human beings dressed in costumes doing crazy shit. And once he says that, Batman's camera actually changes to go in the same direction as Joker's camera, because now they're on the same page. It's little things like that is just kind of what creates like a masterful story.
Yeah, I'm going back through that scene now in my head, and it's so as a videographer, someone who's filming a scene like in The Dark Knight where it's super cinematic, there's the actual story with the lines and the characters and the body language, and then there's the story that the videographer chooses to tell with the way that he's panning the camera or zooming in and out or having two different ways that the lens is moving, like in the Dark Knight scene, for example. There's like this whole back storyline of the videographer trying to align the movements with what's going on in the story. Yeah,
like something to make it, maybe break it down in a more simple terms, is that the camera is a representation of the character we're looking at. And so the way that camera looks and moves should be kind of what the character is going through mentally. So, you know, when something terrifying happens or something scary is happening, what's happening to the camera? It's all shaky, where it's unstable. We don't know what's going on. Or when we introduce a villain, usually the camera's still or it's very smooth, because this character is like, you know, an intimidating, unmovable force. So yeah, there's literally so much that could go into creating all these photos and videos. It can be very overwhelming, and that's why you see in professional Hollywood films and movies, there's hundreds of people who have a very specific task of making sure the lighting looks good on this character or whatever.
Is there a piece of film or maybe a show during the pandemic that you were watching that caught your eye in terms of the videography? Like something that you've been watching recently that you maybe look to as inspiration, or is something that stood out and you made note of it for some technique or something that videographer was doing?
I have a few answers. When I look for inspiration, Scott Pilgrim versus the World is amazing. Edgar Wright, amazing director, and he really knows how to transition scenes. The scene transitions are so creative and just fascinating, because it's a movie that's based off of a video game that's based off of a comic book, and so there's a lot of stuff you can play with there. I also recently watched The Graduate, which is a classic, very slow-paced movie, but in terms of the framing, the composition, and the lens choices, I think we're just masterful in that. For example, something that happens is when you shoot with a really long lens, where you can see super far away, depth gets really distorted there. And so they shot this character running on a super long lens, and you know he's running down that street, but it looks like he's not moving at all. He's not growing in size like you would expect with depth. And so it was an awesome way to show that this character was stuck. He was trying to run away, but he was still jogging in the same place, basically.
So the way that the camera was set up made it look like this person was running, but they weren't gaining any ground. It was like they were going through the movement of running. On the screen, though, they were just kind of standing in place almost. Yeah,
so even though they are actually running down a street, the way the lens they chose made it look like he wasn't moving, he wasn't growing, or as you would expect with depth perception. Things that are in this mirror closer than they appear, type of thing.
Yeah. You've obviously been around a lot of videographers and you've been around a lot of creative people, and you've done a ton of videography work yourself, of course. Is in your experience and observing others and kind of taking a third-party approach to your own work, where you're observing what makes the best pieces of content the best that you've created, are there things that the best videographers pay attention to at kind of a broad through line level that maybe amateur videographers or intermediate, somewhere like 5 to 7 years in, may not be paying attention to? Something that the best of the best look for, maybe small things, could be huge things, but like a through line grasp where, you know, if this person is good at filming, they're definitely gonna look at this. They're definitely gonna make sure like this is set up when they do their thing.
I feel like there's so many different answers to that, but one that I think is easy to understand and game changing is eye tracing. And this is an editing technique. So imagine, you know, you're back at a movie theater, and the screen's gigantic, right? So your eyes are bouncing around the screen, trying to find the subjects and follow it along. A great filmmaker, a great director, and a great editor will edit in a way or move the scene in a way where your eye will be drawn from one side to the next as the scene transitions. So if a character's on the right side of the screen and we need to get the viewer to look at the left side, there may be some motion coming from the right to left. It could be as simple as somebody walking by in the background, or maybe the camera is starting to move that direction. And so your eye starts following, and then the scene cuts. Bam, now your eye's not bouncing around every time the scene changes. And this is something you'll see a lot in action movies, where good action movies have a lot of the action in the center screen. That way, every time they cut, even if it's super fast paced, the action stays in one exact spot, so your eye can easily find what it should be looking for.
So there's an expectation created by the person filming, and then some sort of fulfillment of that expectation, like something moving in the background towards that direction, and then the camera eventually goes that way, or the scene cuts that way, and then the viewer gets the satisfaction of, okay, my brain thought that was going to happen, and then it did. So it's almost like kind of this hit of like almost like in music sometimes, where you have these undertones in the background where you think the song is going to go in a certain direction, and 90% of the time it does. But then strategically, sometimes people will go against that, where they're creating an expectation and then it goes in a direction you weren't expecting, maybe in the last part of the song or the last part of the film.
Yeah, it's all transitions, and you know, great filmmaking is manipulating the viewer, and not in a bad way. It's manipulating how they're experiencing what you're showing them, and especially with eye tracing. You know, when you're watching a 2-hour movie, if there isn't proper eye tracing, your eyes are like bouncing around so much, and that's actually can bring fatigue, because your mind has to look around and guess what it's looking at and then make the connection. If you can eliminate the looking around and searching part, then your mind can make those connections a lot faster. It's a more smooth experience for the viewer.
That makes sense. That makes me think of Muay Thai and following pads almost in a weird way. And I started doing Muay Thai about 8 months ago during the pandemic. So in kind of a weird way, I feel a fatigue from my brain from looking in different directions for pads. When the trainer calls out a certain combination, I notice Muay Thai more than any other physical activity I've done fatigues my brain following commands, and the way that my eyes have to move around and keep track of shit and follow where I'm going to the next point. So I imagine if you take that to the screen and your eyes have no sort of rhyme or reason, and there's a lot of guesswork going on, and maybe there's confusion going on in the viewer's mind. They're not really sure what's supposed to happen, or their expectations are being fulfilled in a way where or maybe aren't being fulfilled in a way that they think, and it's like almost too much guesswork for them, that can cause some sort of mental fatigue with the eyes and the brain of the viewer trying to keep track of all those things.
Yeah, because you have to think that, you know, every time a scene changes or the shot changes, it's almost completely different. And so your mind has to now reanalyze a new picture. And you may not even realize you're analyzing it, but subconsciously your brain takes in a lot of new information. It's just kind of a side note. Your brain, we've evolved to recognize there's a snake in a picture before we consciously realize it. They've actually done studies where they'll show a camouflage snake, and the person's heart rate will start increasing, their blood pressure starts increasing before they even recognize that it's there. So there's a lot that your mind is processing that you don't really think about. And when you're making something like a 2-hour film, you're showing them not just like 100, but sometimes like thousands of shots that they have to analyze. And so, yeah, it's all about making that a more smooth, streamlined experience.
Yeah, it's interesting to keep in mind the work that the viewer or the listener has to do with their own mental capacity, and they have a limited amount of energy too. So the easier you make it on that person to listen to a podcast or view a podcast or watch a movie, short film, whatever it is, it seems like the less energy that person has to expend keeping track of what's going on, the longer they're likely to engage with what you have on screen or what you have on video or in your headphones.
Yeah, exactly. I think one thing a lot of creators forget about is that you have to respect the audience, and your job is to make the viewer's experience the best that it can be. And so putting in all those little extra details really does add up to a lot. And I tell people all the time, like, a good editor, a good filmmaker does not work faster. They usually take a lot longer because they're putting in all of that extra effort to make it such a good end product.
So, yeah, I want to touch on that for a little bit, because that's something that I've been struggling with, because I make the assumption that because I am becoming better at what I do, the time that I spend doing these things should not be taking X amount of time, like 2 hours, 3 hours. But the thing is, as I find more ways to research a podcast or come up with questions, topics, I find myself spending more time doing these things because I discover intricacies about them that I didn't know before, where at a beginner level, I kind of brushed over them. And so sometimes I beat myself up because I think, I've been doing this for 2 years, 3 years. It should take me half the amount of time to launch an episode as it did before. Yet I'm discovering more things, and I don't realize, kind of like subconsciously in the background, I'm figuring out how to dive more deeply into certain aspects of those tasks, and that is expanding the time. And I think I struggle with that as a creator. I'm sure a lot of people struggle with that as well, where they feel themselves getting better at something, yet they're spending so much time of their day doing a task, and they're asking themselves, am I really, because it's hard to feel that progression over years. When you look at yourself yesterday as opposed to 2 years ago, it's much easier to see that difference, but you live with yourself every day. So it's like, I don't really feel like I got that much better at this. But then you see something you made 3 years ago and you're like, oh yeah, I have, even though I'm spending the same amount of time, I'm focusing on different things.
Well, that's what I love about I guess just creative fields in general, is you can literally go back and see how your process was different and how your quality has changed. And surprisingly, for me, I really don't think a lot of the stuff I made I would change from a filming aspect. I think a lot of the things I would change would be in the editing, to keep the flow better, and to introduce more like sound effects to make you feel like you're in the world. Because video, people often forget, half of it is audio. So your audio has to be really good. There's a common saying, like, people will forgive bad video quality, they will not forgive bad audio.
Yes, I know that very well in podcasting. There's I don't know why, that must be something maybe evolutionarily with the way that we process audio, but I feel like my ears adjust to bad audio over a period of time where I don't, after listening to a piece of audio for 5 minutes, the bad quality does not hit me anymore. It's kind of in the background, and the content is at the front. With bad video, though, you're right, like it never kind of goes away that you're watching something blurry, or maybe it's edited poorly. So that's like an interesting part of human psychology. I have no idea, where that comes from.
Well, I just think I don't know, maybe sound is just so important for survival, because we're able to be aware of things that we can't see. So maybe we're just more in tune to that sense. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure the viewers would be fine, maybe listening or watching with a kind of a lower quality image. But if I was talking and like this was happening the whole time, that would suck.
Can you do that for the next 90 minutes? I think that would add to the overall. Exactly.
No, there you go.
That right there.
Beautiful. I mean, that would annoy the hell out of you, right?
Yeah. No, it's it could be that we were made to pick up more on audio, so that somehow sinks into the background. This is more of an introspective question that I have for you about filming people, and in a sense, because you're watching people through a lens, you're watching so much of the world through a lens, and you're responsible for editing those pieces of footage into a clean and exciting way, and you're going through hundreds of hours of footage of people that doesn't make it into the final product. Is there anything that videography or photography has taught you about human psychology from a watching people aspect, where you realize something either about filming people, the way people behave, respond to commands? Like, is there anything interesting to say about how people act when they're on film versus when they're not on film, or they don't know they're on film?
Yeah. God, there's so much to that. I want to touch on something right before that. Like, one thing I think is really cool about like videography and like documentaries or weddings is you get to kind of live other people's experiences. You get to be a part of someone's like life experience in like a fly on the wall way. And so it's really interesting to get down to the psychology of it, because there are so many different types of people out there. And as the videographer or as the director or documentarian, you kind of have to be able to match someone's energy and kind of roll with it. Because a lot of times, at least for most of the work that I do, I'm meeting new people every time. I'm working with new CEOs, new whatever, every single time. And so you kind of have to figure out, who is this person, what is their energy level, and how can I communicate with them in a way that's effective for them. Like some CEOs, they don't want explanations. They just want a quick yes or no, and we're done. Other people want to talk and have fun. And then it's also interesting, like, I used to film a ton of events. And so I was often filming people having fun, and then they would turn, see that the camera's pointed right at them. And, there's only two responses. There's like, they shut down, they're almost embarrassed or ashamed of in some way, or they just embrace it and they're like, hey.
Yeah.
And I think the younger generations definitely embrace it more because of social media and whatnot. Older people are kind of, more inquisitive about what's going on. Like, why is this camera pointed at me? Because they're just not as used to it as the younger generations are.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like a fight or flight response being filmed. You're either going to grow or shrink your energy when you see someone's filming or when someone's filming you. And yeah, I've experienced that from the host side, as having filmed somewhere over a dozen podcasts together, where most of the time I know someone's energy going into a podcast, the guest's energy. So it's never really that jarring when I'm speaking to someone, because I learned to almost have this subconscious thing in my mind watching their interviews beforehand, or maybe going through their Instagram, social media, where I probably have like a 30 to 40% feel of that person going in, and that varies depending upon the guest. There's a real, and fake is the wrong word. It's not like you fake someone's energy, but it's like more of an adjustment of, okay, this person is lower energy, so I'm not gonna come off as overexcited. I'm not going to overwhelm them. Maybe they'll take that stimulus and they'll shrink. And then another person may be so excited at this high level all the time. So it's like they almost take offense at you being low energy, or they think something is wrong because you're kind of at this level, they're at their level. So it really is like a game of matching energy and kind of finding that happy zone of, okay, this person is really comfortable when I'm here, or this person's not so comfortable when I'm here. And a lot of that is learning in real time, I'm sure, on the set, where you don't always know who the person is like that you're filming, and you're building a sense of that as it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally just lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good. Happens all the time.
But yeah, it's definitely just a skill, I think, that you naturally develop, especially with, I did a lot of documentary work and a lot of weddings where, like, even with the wedding couples, I would only really meet with them once, or maybe have like one phone call with them, and then I see them on their wedding day. Most of the time I didn't really even know who they were. And so, yeah, I think it's so important to match that energy, because I think we've all met somebody new and the energy was just off. If you're having a slow, low energy day, you don't want to be around somebody who's like talking like this. All right, man, let's do this, and this.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in order to get the best possible performance on camera, and I say performance in general, even if it's like a wedding, they need to be comfortable. They need to feel like it's okay to be themselves. And I think a lot of people, when they look into an actual camera lens, it's like looking into like a black hole of death. Like some people just freeze up, and they all of a sudden, someone who's super personable just can't even talk and doesn't know what to say. And so it's definitely an interesting challenge each time.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that later with TikTok and Clubhouse, because those are two interesting apps that have come on the scene, and one is video and one is not, and I've spent a decent amount of time on both. And so I definitely wanted to get into that video, non-video dynamic. Before we do that, though, you changed your name. You changed the name that you go by when you were younger, from Noah Worth to Manoa Raine. What made you want to do that?
Okay, so this is kind of a long backstory, but my real name is Manoa Raine Worth. And I grew up in a small country town, and a lot of people, Manoa is kind of a weird name. So at a young age, everyone just called me Noah, and even my family calls me Noah. And so I was known as Noah Worth. But I really didn't have a great childhood experience. It wasn't like completely awful, but I was just bullied a lot in school, specifically for my creativity. I had people just kind of like tear up my drawings, and at a young age, I was kind of like the weird kid. And so that persona kind of just stuck. When you grow up in one place, it's hard to kind of escape what people perceive you as. And so, around the age of 12, my mom decided she wasn't having a good experience in my hometown. I was having a bad experience. And so we said, let's get out of here. And when we moved, I recognized that was an opportunity for me to change, to kind of, not be this shy, weird, unconfident kid, and that I could now reform myself. I was going into a new group of people who didn't know who I was. They didn't have any perceptions of me. They didn't know my history or anything. And so I became very adamant during that move that I'm going to change to be the person I want to be. And so part of that, I'm not sure if it was just a psychological trick I kind of pulled on myself at a young age, but I decided to go by Manoa Raine instead of Noah Worth. And what's so funny is that I literally have dog tags from the Smithsonian that I got on a field trip that says Noah Worth on it. And I see that as so symbolic because I genuinely feel like a completely different person. I went from being the quiet, kind of weird kid to being a loud, weird kid.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because Noah Worth is so close to Know Your Worth, and you have it on a
Isn't
dog
that
tag.
wild? I did.
Yeah.
Wow. Hold on. I need a moment to process that. I have literally never thought about that.
That just it popped into my head when you said I have Noah Worth on a dog tag. I was like, Noah Worth, Know Your Worth. That's actually pretty cool. I mean, one syllable away.
Yeah, I this is kind of just random, but I remember my band teacher literally made a joke that I was worthless, and
what?
So I didn't. Yeah, I'm not even joking.
Your band teacher made a joke that you were worthless?
Yeah, my marching band teacher in 7th grade said that, and so
damn,
I think
what a dick.
Again, that's
what a douchebag.
Yeah, it just was not a fun time. But yeah, that's why I think I fought so hard against it. It's like as a kid, I had to deal with a lot of that, and I think changing my name was a way to almost like instantly escape that and reset everything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is weird how people latch on to the other or the weird aspects in other people, especially as teenagers. So a lot of people talk about this generation or the younger generations, people 30 and below, as being softer or more sensitive. And there are ways in which that's true because we haven't been like drafted into war or anything like that, previous generations. But a positive aspect of that is I think that people are becoming more sensitive to weirdness as kids. Like it's not necessarily kids don't necessarily grow up wanting to be the star athlete or the star music artist as like exclusively as they did in the past, where that was kind of the upper echelon. Everyone wanted to be, Major League Baseball player or someone like Halsey singing on stage, and a lot of people still do, but there are also these other things that have opened up that were in the weird category before. Like a lot of kids are growing up now saying, I want to make a social media app. I want to be an app developer. I want to go work for Google. I want to be a YouTuber. I want to make comedy sketch videos online. I think that sensitivity also has a way of making people more accepting of that, whatever it is that people consider weird as teenagers, the outlier in the group.
Yeah. Well, I think TikTok was definitely a huge help for that. I think, and Vine and, all of those early kind of social medias like that, it showed people that you could have a super weird skill or a super specific thing you could do, and people would celebrate that and think it's super cool. And I think I think, of course, there's some negative sides to it, but I do think it's allowing people to kind of embrace their weirdness and be more comfortable being themselves. I think we're moving more towards an era of authenticity to some extent. People are more willing to introduce those weird aspects of themselves or talk about more personal topics to complete strangers online. So I think that's a really just interesting shift to watch evolve over these years.
Is there something that you say to yourself when you feel yourself shrinking away from the weirdness that gives you more confidence, or some routine that you go through that allows yourself to embrace that weird. Like, if, for example, I have a document taped to my desk inside when I record podcasts, and the daily podcast, which I do inside my room. And basically I have a long list of things I wrote to myself for different quotes, where the through line of all of that is, you don't need the approval of anyone else. Do whatever it is that you do, be the best in the world at whatever it is you do, and keep getting better at that. You know, don't give a fuck what other people think. And that thing taped to my desk, that Word doc with a bunch of different quotes and inspirations on it, is what I look to every morning when I feel myself questioning my own weird. Is there something that you do that allows you to sink more confidently into the weirdness of you, whatever it is that makes you you?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't think there's something that I have like that, because I think I can just kind of turn that on at this point. I live with another creator, and when we first moved in together, he did a lot of vlogs. And so I had to get used to being in front of the camera to kind of bring like high energy. And that took a while, but I think living with Will and being kind of immersed in that experience, it just kind of allowed me to be weird. Like, we're super weird around each other at home, and we'll say weird things, or be super loud and obnoxious, and with the expectation that the other person is completely free to do that as well. And so I think I get just a lot of that weird naturally at home. Yeah. And we just embrace that.
Yeah. I mean, this kind of leads into what I like about TikTok, and this could be a good spot to get into this now before we get into the move to LA and everything you've been doing the past few months. But TikTok, it's so fascinating to me that these, like, quote unquote weird people have built huge followings, where Instagram may not have allowed them to show what it is that they do well in a consumable piece of content, where what they were doing may not necessarily be captured by a picture really well, and you wouldn't stop and look at it in a feed like Instagram. And now Instagram is changing with Reels, so they have their own TikTok clone in a way. But TikTok was really like, I can film something on my phone, I can cut it up really quick, I can put captions, I can add all these effects, and it allowed you to add a lot more creative input to these short form videos. And it's not super clean. Like, a lot of videos that I see that go super viral, there's nothing beautiful about the actual like quality of the video. It's pretty pedestrian. Some person's filming in their room with decent lighting. It's not great, it's not terrible, but it's just like, it is. But the content, what the person's saying, is really able to shine on a TikTok like platform. And I feel like you said, it's a good way to showcase the shit that makes you weird and the shit that other people are attracted to, that they may not have been able to latch onto in the past, like with a platform like Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think TikTok has also changed the game by kind of making things more about like quantity instead of quality. Kind of like you mentioned, a lot of these super viral big posts are purposely made to look like anybody could have done it. And that kind of ties into, I guess, that era of authenticity, of where we don't need these super high-end productions anymore. We can do stuff at someone's house, and people are okay with that. People don't need the highest quality stuff because, like you said, it's the story and kind of what they're saying that matters. It's not the video quality, it's the message. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting to see with Clubhouse now as well, how that's starting to really pop off as eliminating all of the flashy visuals and just getting straight down to the point and with the messaging and conversations.
Yeah, Clubhouse is interesting because it takes away the traditional feed and it replaces it with rooms. And for people who haven't been on Clubhouse yet, you join different rooms that people are speaking in. You can get invited up onto the stage, which is where you can talk to everyone else is in the room. You can start your own room. You can start your own clubs. And there's not really like the traditional feed where you think about in Instagram or Twitter, where it's showing you the most popular things that people have liked or the most recent things that people have posted. It's like the followers are important, but in a different way, where people get notified whenever you're in a room or whenever you start your own room, rather than I just posted something, everyone go look at it, everyone go like it. It's like, no, I just started a room. If you have a lot of followers, people may be interested. You'll get more interest at the start, but you have to be interesting to keep those people's attention on a long form audio platform like Clubhouse. So that's super interesting to me.
And and I think there's not I haven't seen a lot of people who are really good at navigating Clubhouse, and not that I am either, but being on Clubhouse, you have to be like a host. And I don't think a lot of people know the intricacies of hosting and how to kind of manage the energies and shift it around. I've seen so many like really big talks where it's really clunky and awkward. So I'm interested to see how that evolves, because it's still in its very early stages, and people will streamline that whole process as it grows. But I'm loving the collaborative nature that TikTok and Clubhouse brings, because a lot of TikTok is, borrow a piece of someone else's content, add it to your own, put your own spin on it, and that's really cool to see all these different people kind of like mimicking and reshaping and reforming and repurposing the piece of content. And then Clubhouse is very much starting conversations and connections with people, and getting a lot of creators and people in other fields connected super fast and easy, and also delivering so much good information from a variety of different sources. I'm so fascinated to see where society kind of takes off with these new concepts. Maybe not the apps themselves, but the concepts of what they're doing, I think is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, Lil Nas X is someone I've been basically studying on TikTok, because he's become a master at the platform, where he blew up Old Town Road on TikTok, and now, for example, with his latest release, Montero, he put out the song and then he released it on TikTok as audio, and then he put out the video, and it seems like behind the scenes he has to be thinking of, okay, how can I make this 3 to 4 minute video? How can I break this down into viral pieces of content? When I share these on TikTok in 15 to 30 second bites, what are the trends that I can do with this? How can I make this super shareable? Because the day he released the video, he's on TikTok, whether it's he's doing certain dances from the video or he's sharing certain clips, and then people take that and run with it, and they post their own clips, and then he reposts the ones that he likes, and then that starts more people saying, okay, I'm gonna post this because there's a chance that I might get on Lil Nas X's page. And yeah, it seems like he has a really good pulse on, more than any other music artist right now, of like how to bang the nerve of TikTok to make people really give a shit about what you're doing through that platform, and create content that you can then chop up individually into videos or create like he makes super trendable content.
Yeah,
his songs are great and they're bops and I love them, and they're also super trendy. Like it's built into the song, and it seems like he would have to be thinking about things like that, which is fascinating to think about, that he's making a song in mind with, how is this gonna look on TikTok, or how is this gonna look on Instagram a week after I post this?
Well, I think this is something that a lot of the best artists do. It's when an artist comes out with a music video, it's not to be like oh, look at this video. It's a marketing tool to get more people to watch or to get interested, and especially like Little Nas X with the I forgot the name of the song with Satan.
Montero.
Yeah, like genius when he has so many haters in that kind of area. And so, you know, it's fascinating to watch. I think more people are starting to understand how to market themselves now, or they're attaching themselves to these trends that are starting to kind of market people and to boost their numbers and whatnot. But we've seen that for so long. I mean, look at Kanye West with his song that's like poopity whoop scoop, and you know, he was like, this is one of my new singles on my upcoming album. Now everyone's talking about it. I didn't even care about Kanye or had ever listened to his music until that came out, and you're damn well sure I listened to that album because I had to see if that was one of the singles, what's going to happen next.
Yeah. What I wanted to get into next is you moved to LA in late 2020.
Yeah.
A lot of people, there have been a lot of people who have fled LA and fled California in general. And there have also been a decent number of people like yourself and a few other friends that I know personally that have moved to California, moved to LA. So it seems like a split of the future of what's going to go on the West Coast. For you, what were the main drivers behind the decision to go to LA? What led up to you deciding to make the move out there?
It's kind of a crazy stream of events. So my best friend Will, who I live with now and I lived with back in New York, we had just gotten rid of a toxic roommate. They're not a bad person. They're just not good living with us. And it was kind of a really hard experience. And right after that, we were like, man, we just need to get out of this apartment. We need to reset for a little bit. And we had just gone on the keto diet and lost all this weight. And we told ourselves, like, once we lose all this weight, we're going to go to the beach and like just enjoy ourselves. And so it was getting cold in New York. This was around like November. So we decided, let's go to LA for like, you know, a week or two and just chill out. And we actually ended up like working literally the entire time nonstop. But in between all of that work, we were meeting up with all of these old friends and connections that we had back in college, back in New York City, or even people who we met while like traveling the world. And we literally were just having such a good time. And we had like the perfect day where we went to hang out with Will's friend Andrew, who's another filmmaker, and we just had an awesome time. And we ended it by doing a photo shoot on Mulholland Drive, where you can oversee all of LA. And man, it was such a good day that we walked back into the place we were staying at. We hadn't said a word to each other about this, and we just looked at each other in the eye. And I'm just like, so we're doing this? And he's like, yep. And like that's all that needed to be said. And you know, we just realized we had a lot of friends and connections, and the opportunities here were pretty big for us. A lot of our big clients were actually in LA. And so literally while we were on vacation in LA, we were looking for places to stay here. And within 2 weeks, we found a nice studio, locked that in, and made the move literally in like a month and a half.
Fuck yeah. So you weren't planning to move to LA before that trip. It was purely let's chill out / work trip. You ended up working almost the entire time, and then you both intuitively looked at each other and said, we're fucking moving to LA. That's sick.
Yeah, man. I mean, it was just crazy. It literally felt like a movie moment. And I'm so glad we moved here, because things have accelerated so much. Like, I felt like New York was really slowing down for the creative scene, or maybe not slowing down, but plateauing. Nothing was really growing. Everyone was just waiting things out. But things are still happening in LA because, you know, it's big, it's open. There's a lot of things you can do outside, whereas New York is just so cramped. You can't really film anywhere. So it just made sense, and it felt right. And I'm a firm believer that, when you see an opportunity, you have to take it right there, or it's going to go away super quick.
So LA feels creatively alive right now, more so than New York?
Yeah, at least for what we're doing. I definitely think so. Our work has spiked exponentially since we moved here, to the point where we're getting like so many projects coming in, and bigger projects, that we're having to start finding teams of people and start building these bigger projects. We actually have our first national TV commercial that we're working on right now.
What commercial is that? What company is that for?
So I can't say what company it's for. It's for a new luxury brand tequila.
Okay.
So you'll know the details about that soon, I'm sure, but I can't talk about it until it's out.
Yeah, dude. Of course. That I mean, I admire the tenacity and the fluidity and the quickness with which you moved from New York to LA. Because I remember we hung out a few times at your place, and then maybe a week or two later, I get a text that you were going to hang out in LA, and then a few days after that, I got a text saying, "Hey, I think I'm moving out here." And I was like, damn, because I've been around New York my whole life, so in a way, I have a base here. My family's here, my brothers are here, a lot of my friends are here, and it is great being in New York, and platforms like Riverside are a blessing that allow me to connect with people across the world, whether it's on the other side of the United States or, in Europe, Asia, South America, somewhere like that. I have thought about, though, like, what is New York really the best place to set up a podcast studio when I eventually want to do that? Because I do want to have some sort of team and some sort of home base where I know I'm recording here once a week or twice a week, whatever it is. I'm going to be in this studio. I'm going to drop rent on this studio, and this is going to be a home. So I admire how you made the move so quickly and knew what you wanted and then made it happen. Because a lot of people talk about it, not a lot of people actually put it into motion.
Yeah, thank you, man. I don't know. I've just realized that most of the risks I've taken have generally worked out. And it may not always work out exactly the way you think or want, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And thankfully, I know I'm aware that I'm at the point in my life where I'm still young and I have the ability to do these things. And in New York, I maybe wasn't as tied down as you are, because I don't have any family near there. I had a few friends, but I wasn't from there, so I didn't have those like deep-rooted connections and kind of ties to New York. But New York's amazing. There's nothing against it. I really loved my time there, but I admittedly am enjoying my time a little bit better over in LA.
Yeah.
But I think you can set up wherever you want, man. Having a headquarters in New York, I mean, everyone goes through New York City at some point in the year in the creative fields,
Yeah, it's true. It's definitely not as alive, of course, with everything that's happened in the pandemic. But I do have confidence that New York's gonna remain a creative hub and a hub in general for people to come through. And why not have a couple home bases? If the business is doing well, have one in New York and LA, go back and forth. That would be pretty sweet.
Hell yeah, man. I could totally see that happening. AUXORO takes over the nation.
Yes, sir. So one of the ways in which Manoa Raine has taken over the nation and taken over the videography game is you recently did a shoot with Jason Derulo, and I've been dying to ask you about that. So So for what you're allowed to talk about, because I don't know if the content has actually come out yet, or if you're still in the process of putting it out, how did that happen, first of all, and what was that day like? What was that shoot like, interacting with someone like Jason Derulo, who is, in a sense, had like a second birth of his career through social media and TikTok? He was a superstar in the early mid 2000s when I was in high school. So back in 2007 to 2011, that era, Jason Derulo was all over, then kind of dipped off and then blew up on TikTok. So I'm super interested to hear how that shoot came together and what it was like being on set with someone like that.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely was a crazy experience that we didn't expect was going to happen at all. So a little bit of backstory is that my roommate Will works with Westbrook a lot, which is Will Smith's production company. And they hire out creators to go work with a bunch of different celebrities and create content for them. And Will had a friend that he met through there who, like, sadly had a family emergency, and he was supposed to shoot with Jason Derulo that day. And so, Will, being the awesome badass he is the person they call up, and they're like, hey, like, we had to cancel last minute. Like, we need someone to be there to capture this special effects content, which is what Will specializes in. And we were literally both like laying in our beds, just like half asleep. And, the phone call, Will's on the phone. I don't hear what's happening. And then he hangs up and he's just like, holy shit. He's like, I have to be at Jason Derulo's place in like an hour. And I'm like, what? It's wild to hear. And so Will asked if I could come along and like help him film and also just, be a part of the experience since we worked together. And I was like, absolutely. And so literally throwing on clothes, grabbing our gear, we had to leave in like 10 minutes. And so on the way to Jason Derulo's house in the Uber, we're having to come up with, ideas kind of on the spot. And he wants stuff for his TikToks. So a lot of flashy special effects stuff. And so we're like, I think freaking out 20%, but we're like professionals 80% of the way there, And we show up and he's like has this new place that he's building, and it's a beautiful spot with a studio and whatnot, and literally just walk up and he's just chilling there on the porch. He's like, hey, what's up, guys? And honestly, it was super casual. I think we're at the point where Will has worked with a few different celebrities, and I've worked with CEOs or professional athletes. And so you don't necessarily get us starstruck because it is for work. This is a job for you and for them. So we were just showing up to do our jobs with the good positive energy. But there was definitely moments, when no one was looking, when we would look at each other and be like, oh my God, this is crazy. Yeah. But we have to act all cool. But working with Jason was a fantastic experience. He was so kind and collaborative and very open to our ideas and working with them. He likes things done in a particular way, so we have to kind of collaborate on how certain things look. But for the most part, it was super awesome, and his team was so nice. There's a lot of people at his place, and literally everybody was so kind. And then he had a cute little dog, Ice, who got to hang out, which I loved.
Yeah, I think watching him is exciting because he's totally taken the lead on TikTok from the music artist perspective, where I remember when I got on TikTok, this is early 2020, so right around when the pandemic started, he was the first person that I saw that his songs were really blowing up and starting trends, and it seemed like he was so on top of it. He was putting videos out every day, a few times a day. He was nailing the special effects and the transition. He clearly was hiring great professionals like yourself and teams of people to work with him, and it seemed like he was one of the artists that realized early on, like, this could literally change my life and change my career. Like, I'm sure he had already made a good amount of money with his first kind of like first wind, I guess I call it, if that's the right wording. But like, he had that early phase of Jason Derulo, and then it kind of faded off. And I'm sure he was kind of set up by that and could have rode off into the sunset. And then TikTok came along, and he kind of got the second wind, where he was exposed to an entire generation beneath him, 13 to 18, that range, where he was crushing the viral videos. And he was the first one too that I saw that was putting in cinematic effort. It was like him and Will Smith, who you mentioned, were like, they were treating TikTok almost like a movie. It was like this 15-second video, they were fitting in an entire story, adding the special effects, and then latching on to trends to push their music or film, whatever he was working on at the time. So I thought that was super cool to see him do that early on in TikTok. And now a lot of music artists that were hesitant to get on TikTok are now on TikTok. And I'm sure Jason Derulo, what has happened with his career has been a huge part of that, where
absolutely
people were putting in the back of their minds, oh, it's just TikTok, nothing's gonna come of this. He's gonna blow up on TikTok, and it's TikTok and music are separate, but you're seeing all these number one songs that are number one on the Spotify charts, global charts, and then they're also number one on TikTok. So there's this huge correlation. Like, if you want to go global on Spotify, it would really help your chances if you figured out TikTok and became good at TikTok.
Exactly. I mean, it's just, it's another marketing tool, and I think he definitely recognized that, as with everybody else who's really starting to jump on the bandwagon now. And I didn't even realize he was so big on TikTok. Like, to be honest, I'm not on TikTok that much, so I was super interested to look through all the stuff he did, and I was surprised that he was embracing it, because at least in my mind, I listened to Jason Derulo a lot when I was in high school. And I remember jamming out to him on the way in school and back and stuff. But I hadn't really heard of anything that he had done for quite a few years. And so, yeah, it was cool to see somebody who was just embracing it and having fun with it too. Like, he's some of these people you work with, they're just doing it to make a buck or whatever, but he's like having fun, and he wants to be a part of it, and he wants it to happen. And so it was cool just working with somebody as like a creator. So he was excited by the creative aspect of it. It wasn't just like, I'm gonna shoot this and to have something to post. It was like he was clearly excited by the creative process. Yeah, like, Will, it was working for an ad for a banking company called Dave, which the ad's already out. And, Will, with the video, was doing special effects where he was cloning Jason Derulo interacting with himself. But he would do things like slap things out of his hand or like interact with the scene around him. And so, it was cool where Will's explaining this to Jason, and he's like, wow, that's like so cool, or, oh, I love that. And, he's getting all jazzed up.
Yeah, so he was like a kid almost while you were filming. Like, he was like super excited by the things that you guys were contributing. Even though he's this huge superstar, he was still enamored by what you were bringing to the table. Yeah.
I would say maybe him being a kid is a little much, but definitely that sort of energy,
like childlike, almost like fun energy. Like he's
cracking jokes, he's laughing, like we're all having like a really great time, and at the same time, we were there as professionals to do a job, and so it's really nice when you get to have that balance of like, we're here to do really good stuff, but let's also have fun at the same time. A lot of times you just get the we're only here to work sort of mentality.
Mm-hmm. Was there anything that surprised you about that day, or surprised you about working with Jason, looking back on it, you maybe weren't expecting?
I just I remember two things just come to mind. It may not be exactly answering the question, but I noticed that he had a lot of Capri Sun in his fridge. And I was like, I love that this guy's just drinking Capri Sun. You know, you think of like a multi-millionaire just like sipping on a Capri Sun. It's just kind of wild.
Yeah.
And also, I remember we asked if he had an extra tripod so we could set up this specific shot. And he gave us like this cheap $10 tripod that literally would like break if you touched it. And I was just like, how do you have this like this level of a tripod? You know, when you're doing these high-end productions, you have professional videographers. I'm like, what is this, dude?
Yeah.
But it's nice that he can like laugh along about that. You know, he's like, yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Capri Sun's got to hop on that Jason Derulo sponsorship. Do some nice videos with that for sure.
But yeah, honestly, I would just say the most surprising thing was just his overall demeanor. Because again, you never really know what type of personality you're really going to deal with, because somebody's persona on camera and on TikTok can be very, very different to who they are in person. And so it was nice that it was pretty much the same energy.
Yeah, I mean, I felt that at a much smaller level than Jason Derulo. Obviously, like he's basically the king of TikTok. I've built a decent following on TikTok, and one of the things that I've noticed creating videos for myself is I have a gauge of, is this exciting to me? Is this fun? And if not, I don't want to do it, because I know that podcasting is the foundation of what I do, and music is the foundation of what Jason Derulo does. And I have this like, I'm like, if I'm going to be adding something extra onto what I do, it has to be fun. So I'm going to make TikTok fun for me. And if I'm not having fun, then I need to change something about it or approach it in a different way. And so I go through these periods where I do something and it may get more views or it may get more interaction, but like it just, after doing it for weeks or months, it just is not fun anymore. So I just change it up. And so it's interesting to see that you know, it also sounds like that's something that goes through a creator's head at the biggest level, someone like Jason Derulo, where he's looking for ways to have fun and looking for ways to make it exciting, even though he knows that what this is going to get however many views. He's still thinking, you know, like, I want to have fun with this. I want to, you know, do this in a way that's adding to the quality of my life per se. Like it's gonna be fun as shit to do today. Like I would do this even if I had other things I wanted to do today. Like, how can I have the most fun with this right now?
Yeah, well, kind of to add on to that, we were only supposed to be there for like 2 hours, but we had to film for like 7. And I know that cut into so much of his time, and he had to do some things in between. Like he had to choreograph an entire like dance number for like an hour, and then he had to do like a live performance. But even though we were there much longer than anticipated, he was just always like having fun about it. And I think to some extent, you know, that can be like a conscious choice to go into that situation, just saying, you know, I may be exhausted, I may not want to really do this right now, but let's bring that energy and just enjoy the moment.
Yeah, it's a framing. You may not be able to control the time frame, or you may not be able to control the external things that are happening to you, but you can control the mindset from which you experience it. Am I going to try to enjoy the intricacies and allow myself to be excited by the process, or am I going to shut off or focus my mind on what's going to happen 4 hours from now? How can I get out of this sooner? So it is, no matter what level you're at, it is a conscious choice of how am I going to experience this right now. The framing is so powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even knowing that and saying that, it's definitely still something I have a lot of problems with. You know, it's hard when you feel super low energy to be like, I gotta just build myself up and do this. It's very hard, but I think it's, at the end of the day, maybe just discipline to get that job done, and then you can just lay on your bed and zone out,
Yeah, no, it's funny because before every podcast I record, as like on cue, as if it's a mechanism that's switched on in my brain to happen before every podcast, I always start to think about the bigger picture of, I'm not here right now in terms of my listens, or I'm not doing what I want to do in terms of social media, or I need to get more attention here. And I'm setting up for a podcast, and I don't know what it is, but I always start to think about these things like right before another podcast. And I always, like, I have this moment where I kind of switch off that side of my brain consciously, and I say, okay, for the next 2 hours, you have no other job besides interacting with this person and having a conversation with this person. And it's taken me, like, I still struggle with it. It's still a struggle to switch off the future part of my brain for these conversations and for daily tasks in general. But I definitely feel that struggle to be present in the moment creatively and put on the back burner of, okay, I have these goals for myself, and also I need to do this thing right now to the best of my ability, so it's not advantageous for me to think about where I need to be a year from now or 6 months from now while I'm filming this thing or recording this thing, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with that a lot. I'm very much like a planner, and I like to feel prepared and ready. And I've noticed when I talk to friends and family, sometimes I'm not like really there, because in my mind there's so much going on I need to prep for, and so I'm just like half listening, half thinking about the future. And it's really hard, especially when so much stuff is happening and you've got stuff like the pandemic throwing a wrench and everything. It's hard to be in the present and just enjoy the moment. Yeah. Life is can get so stressful, man.
So to switch gears from the creator side to the teacher side, you are an instructor at Nas Academy, and you've taught live international video classes. And I can say with confidence that anyone that's listening to this podcast will teach something if they haven't already started to teach already, whether it's a one-on-one situation where it's more casual, or you're teaching a class at being, you're portraying your expertise on a platform and trying to teach people how to do it. That's something that everyone listening to this podcast will do at some point in their life. And you're teaching at the international level. So for you, what was it like teaching international classes on Nas Academy? And it may be good for listeners to back up and kind of explain what Nas Academy is before we get into the actual teaching of it. So what is Nas Academy, and how did you how is the teaching experience for you on an international level, crossing cultures, crossing barriers, teaching people from all across the globe how to be better filmmakers?
Yeah, so Nas Academy is basically a creative online academy that was started by Nas Daily, who in the Americas may not be a super well-known name, but abroad and internationally, Nas Daily is pretty huge. He's got like over 10 million followers on Facebook, and he's known, or was known, as the 1 minute guy. He would make these 1 minute videos that would go so viral on Facebook, and basically grew such a massive platform and business for himself doing this type of storytelling. And so he created the Nas Academy to teach other people how to tell stories in his way, or how to think about storytelling and filmmaking. And so I was brought on pretty early into the Nas Academy process. Will actually met Nas Daily completely randomly. He basically ran into Nas Daily's brother, met Nas Daily that way, and that month flew out with Nas Daily to like Israel to work for his company. And so, during this pandemic, we were really struggling to have money, and the Nas Academy started. So Will jumped on with them, and then Will recommended me. And so I got to hop on as well and teach a month-long 8-lesson course to people from all around the world on how to create good videos from start to finish, literally from like picking up a camera to writing a script to planning to editing to publishing, everything. And it was a crazy experience because at this time I'm 24 years old, teaching people who are either much older than me or are like TV executives in Mexico, or a celebrity in China who like wants to make videos for his social media platforms. And it's crazy being in that position at such a young age, on top of the fact that I have never taught a day in my life before. I literally dropped out of college after my second year, and now I'm like teaching people how to do things. Like it was just very fascinating to be in. And I also had to learn how to teach and communicate with people from so many different cultures, with so many, varying degrees of the English language. Like some people could speak English very well and fluent, other people it's very broken up, and they were in the exact same live class. And so I have to learn how to adapt and teach to these new people, different types of people. Overall, it's just an amazing experience, but yeah, very challenging to deal with all of these different personalities and styles and communications. But man, I loved it. And I literally told, my mom's a teacher, and I told my mom at a young age that I would never be a teacher because I saw how much work she had to put into it and how much care and effort that it takes. And I was like, that's just too much. And I ended up falling in love with it. To teach somebody something that you love and to watch them not only start to understand it, but also start to fall in love with it themselves is such a gratifying and rewarding thing. It's awesome knowing you can give something to somebody and benefit them and help their business or help them capture videos or pictures of their kids. And they're just so happy and gave so much gratitude to all of us at the Academy. And it's something I never thought I would do. And I'm very glad that I did, even though now I had to kind of stop teaching to focus on some other things in my career.
Yeah, I'm sure it came with a lot of difficulty and learning how to navigate a classroom that's full of international students. And I've never been in a position where I've had to teach something like podcasting, although I'd like to be someday. I'm sure, I'm thinking of my own teacher-student experiences, and when I've taught kids how to play baseball or when I've been taught by teachers, we've always been from similar areas, similar towns, have spoken the same native language. Could you talk a little bit about the experience of trying to connect with so many people on a deep level to teach them how to do something like filmmaking, which is so complicated, and yet everyone has different cultural experiences or different, memes floating around their culture, or watching different movies growing up, watching different TV shows, thinking different things are funny. Like, how did you navigate that to cut across and cut through to each person to help them become filmmakers, better filmmakers on a different level than when they started the class?
I think it's a very complex question because you start realizing that every student has such different needs. As we kind of touched on earlier, there's a lot of different things that you have to consider with filmmaking, with the video, the audio, the story. And naturally, some people specialize on one thing and are really good at the script writing, but maybe their filming isn't as great. And so what we did as instructors was we had we had 30 minutes before and after each class where people could come in and you could get that one-on-one feedback. And then we would also have bi-weekly meetings where people could come in and we could really hone in on like what are you really good at, and what do you need to work on to get better. And by allowing that time, it really helped us build them up on that individual level. But you also start learning that you have to talk to them in different ways, and communicate with them in different ways. And I'm not trying to demean any sort of culture or anything when I say these things. It's just from my experience working with people from Eastern countries, specifically like China or Japan. They're very quiet. They're there to listen, and they don't like to speak up and ask questions because they feel like it's rude that you're interrupting. And I want you to ask questions, and I keep voicing that to them, like, please ask, please ask. And so I knew that because of that, when we had little breaks, I would specifically call on some of the more Asian students because I knew they wouldn't speak up. Whereas on the other end, the culture in kind of the Middle East, they're a little bit more direct. And I think in our culture, some of their directness can be perceived as rude, but it's also, they don't speak this language and they're just trying to communicate as directly as possible. And so you have to take that into account and also speak to them very directly. And so not only do you have to adjust your teaching to each individual student's skill set, you also have to be careful about the words that you choose. And I'm consciously having to think about, okay, Nan Fei is really good at English. I can speak quicker, I can say bigger words, whereas Sagar is, kind of in the middle. So I'm going to speak very plainly. I'm going to give him time to process the words I'm speaking, and then we go from there. So
that's a crazy dynamic with all of these students from different cultures and different backgrounds, different demeanors in the same virtual classroom, and then as a teacher having to navigate that and be conscious of how each student is going to react or take a certain direction or not take a certain direction or speak up or not speak up in the background while teaching classes. And there definitely are a broad sort of cultural broad cultural norms in how people react, especially in terms of language or conversation, where I've noticed in dating especially, where maybe if you're going out with an Asian girl, you might have to ask her more questions to get to what she wants to do or what she wants to talk about, where other cultures like Russian may be more straightforward. Like Eastern European people are super blunt, super straightforward. And I've never experienced that in a teaching setting all at once where all those cultures are mashed together. So it's interesting to think about, you can say one thing on a Zoom class and there may be 15 different interpretations based on how that person grew up or that person's cultural demeanor or how they learned to see that piece of language as a teenager when other people spoke it to them. And there's all these different inputs going into every person's brain that you have to deal with as a teacher. And you're also trying to make them better. It's not just like you're having a conversation like this. Like you're also trying to teach them a skill, which is a whole nother layer of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot more complex than I thought it would be. But I did love figuring it out because I love solving problems and puzzles. And to me, it was just like a big puzzle. I had to readjust how I communicated. But yeah, something that you mentioned, it was like, teenagers may take it differently because they have different life experiences. My students could range from 15 years old to 60 in the exact same class. Yeah. And so that, like you said, also adds whole nother level of complexity and communication.
And you mentioned you had different levels of career too, like CEOs or college, or maybe didn't go to college or didn't finish college. So there's also that added dynamic of different expertise level as well in that person's own respective career.
For sure. And it's just crazy because I don't think that by any means that is not the way a normal class is, at least the way that we're used to it. And so, and because of the Academy, we made it to be very interactive. We wanted to be very engaging and interactive. And so, it wasn't just talking to them like you're saying. It's we're taking time to stop and communicate. And one thing that was really challenging for me to handle, and I don't think I handled it well at the time, is one of my students, who I'll call Jack for the sake of anonymity. Jack made a video that we showed in front of class about how abortion should be illegal. And he had some very strong opinions that were very controversial in our class. And here I am, a 24-year-old who did not know this was going to happen, and this guy plays this video, and I'm watching all of the women in this class and pretty much most of the males kind of go like, I don't like this. He wasn't, I don't think he was voicing his argument very well. And again, going with all these different cultures and beliefs and ideas, like, we had to sit down live in class and have kind of a conversation about how, like, hey, I understand that a lot of the students may be upset by this video, but we also have to respect that this is this man's opinion, and this is a creative work. This is what we do as artists, is we have these hard conversations with these videos. We're able to voice our viewpoints. And so, we can't be upset just because the viewpoint's wrong. But Jack, maybe we could have, brought in the other perspective as well. Maybe we could have gotten some further explanation. And I was just fumbling, man. I had no idea how to handle that, like, super complex situation. While also, like, I don't want to tell somebody they can't create something that they are genuinely passionate about. That's not what we're here as artists or as, I think, teachers. But to manage that dynamic that I had no training for was so weird.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. That's a tough situation to be in when you have something brought up in a film class that's as tense as abortion, as politically charged as abortion, where you have different segments of the world where you are growing up thinking a certain thing, and that may be because just you were geographically born in this country where abortion was something that was frowned upon, or you were born in a country where abortion was something that was a regular thing. And that's something that I've never experienced on a teaching level. I have encountered that, of course, with podcasting and people sharing different viewpoints, where it's such an urge where something ticks up in me, almost like a defense mechanism, where I feel like I want to tell other people how to live, or this is my viewpoint and I want to impose it on them. And I try to remember many, and there are times I fail, and I'm like, fuck, like, I was not as open-minded as I should have been in that situation. But I try to remember that people gain an understanding of how they grew up, and that comes from such a complex variety of factors, and what they saw with their parents. Maybe they didn't even grow up with their parents. Maybe they had a completely different religion. Maybe they had some experience that was so wild I can't even begin to understand it. And so podcasting is, especially with disagreements, it's a a battle of saying, rather than I disagree with you and this is how you should live, to say I disagree with you, I understand where you're coming from, and also this is an alternative viewpoint, or this is how I see things based on how I grew up. Not this is how you should see things, but like this is how I've come to understand things. So I can only imagine in a class with 20, 30 plus people, something like abortion's brought up, and you have people all over the planet, that's going to strike different chords at different depths with the entire class, with each person in that class. So I applaud you for getting through that without faking an end call, being like, oh, the connection's breaking up. Oh, shit. Yeah. Oh, crap. Sorry, guys. See you next week.
Dude, I wish I could have done that, man. I mean, I tell you, while I was watching that video, I was literally like, my eyes were so wide, and I'm like, how am I going to handle this? Like, I'm supposed to be giving feedback to this guy's like video, and I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think we did a good job in the moment, but it prepared me later down the line for those similar experiences, because they did come up again to varying degrees.
Yeah, and I'm sure that takes a certain amount of strength from within you to recognize that my job is to make this person a better filmmaker. And so even if I disagree with the content, the actual storyline of this video, or maybe the viewpoint from which he or she is sharing the subject of the video or the content of the video, my job is to analyze it from a filmmaking perspective and make it better from that point of view, and not necessarily persuade them of a certain opinion one way or the other. Exactly.
Like that was the approach I had to take, or the only one I felt like was viable at the time. And so, yeah, I was just trying to teach him maybe how he could adjust his argument to be a little bit more relatable to both sides. And because I do think if you're going to make a video like that, you do need to introduce the other viewpoint and talk about why that may be right as well. Here's the other viewpoint and here's mine. Whereas he was just saying it's wrong, and that's not compelling.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to make sure we got into, which we messaged online before, is your anti-drug upbringing and some of the shifts that you've went through as a professional, as a creative, as a human being, experimenting with other drugs. And you mentioned that weed is now something that you smoke pretty frequently, and I want to know what it's like coming from a household that was super anti-drug, anti-weed, whatever you want to call it, and now being someone that smokes weed pretty frequently. And just from knowing you, like, I know it enhances the creative process, and I don't smoke weed as often because it's something that has been a choice of mine, where it's not like a moral thing. Like, I think weed is bad. It's more like I know that weed brings up a lot of paranoid thoughts and a lot of things, like a lot of dark. I'm working on navigating the world of weed, and I am open to the journey ahead of me as I go through life. So I'm interested to hear from you. How did you go from someone who had the typical, anti-drug talks, anti-weed talks when you were a kid, teenager, I'm assuming, and then into a place where you can comfortably experiment with weed, smoke weed, and be okay with it?
Yeah, so to give you some context and to kind of paint a picture, I was raised by just my mom and my grandma, but mainly my mom, and she was very, very against drugs. The reason being is there's some people in my family who were really talented, really smart, and are very capable, but they went down a path where drugs, I think, kind of helped them go in a negative direction. And that really scared my mom. And it wasn't just the like, don't do drugs. I mean, sometimes she would literally like check my arms to see if I had needle marks in them. She was like super paranoid. One time I came home from soccer practice with grass on my cleats, and she thought it was marijuana, like that I had like left on the ground. Yeah.
You were stomping. You were applying friction with your cleats to smoke the marijuana.
She just saw that and not the cleats part. Okay. She just saw like the flakes and whatnot. But
okay, gotcha.
So that was kind of the upbringing that I was raised in. And so, I had the perception at the time that people who smoked weed were losers, stoners, didn't do anything with their lives. It was just going to hurt me. And I was introduced to it a little bit in high school through like sports teams. And, as I watched people smoke in high school and then a little bit into college, I was realizing that, all of these things I've heard about people being like idiots and whatnot, it can definitely be true, but there's definitely a lot of people who don't act like that, and it doesn't affect that way. And especially as I got into college, where I was kind of free from all like home ties and everything, I started to realize that there's this physics major who makes straight A's in physics who smokes weed all the time. He's not a loser. He's not an idiot. Like, he's really talented and capable. And I've started seeing this more and more. And so that kind of led me into asking a friend, like, hey, I want to try smoking weed. And my first time, my friend, Sander, screw you, Sander, he gave me a gravity bomb for my very first time smoking. And for those who don't know what that is probably one of the most intense ways that you could smoke anything.
It's a wild high.
Yeah, it condenses the smoke so thick and then just rushes into your body at once and just blasts you off. And so my first experience, he hands me this thing. I take it and I immediately throw up just from all the smoke. I just wasn't used to it. And so it wasn't a great experience the first time, but I was willing to give it another shot. And I just realized that when I smoked, I felt very relaxed, very calm. I may seem outwardly calm, but inside I think I'm a little bit of a wreck. I'm very stressed and anxious and thinking about all of these things. And it allowed me to just kind of be at peace and breathe for a little bit. And at the time, I couldn't really work when I was high. I got like way too high because I was new to it, and I didn't know how to really deal with that at all. And over the years of just smoking various degrees, I've kind of found a nice like level where I'm not getting like super, messed up, but I can be at a nice high level and still be interactive and social and think. And so I kind of smoke just about every day at some point in the day, whether it's before I do some editing or, maybe after a long meeting or something like this, just to kind of let my brain relax and chill out before I have to dive into the next thing.
So you feel like you can reach a deeper level of an internal peace or some sort of internal, like quiet the internal dialogue in your head, and weed helps you do that in a way?
Yeah, I think it really helps me be more in the present, kind of tying back into what we were talking about. Is like I'm constantly thinking about the future, all of these things you have to worry about that's coming up. And when I smoke, I can just be like, you know what? This couch is really nice, really comfortable. Like, I really like these walls. Oh, the light looks so nice. And it really gets me to enjoy my environment more, which I think allows me to be more in the moment. I'm recognizing how nice things are, how warm the sun is. And it's not just that it feels warm, but it feels nice. It feels good. And I can be present there.
How did you ramp up in terms of getting to that point where you were comfortable smoking and knowing that it wasn't going to turn into some sort of insane paranoia or dark black hole of thoughts, which is, it's definitely can be a risk if you smoke too much weed, but it sounds like you've gotten to a point where you know your limits, and you've worked yourself up into regular consumption where you can monitor that. How did you go about ramping yourself up? What were you smoking exactly? Did you stick to any certain strains? How were you smoking it? Kind of paint me a picture of because I'm super interested. Like I weed is a drug that I've always said, like, I want to get better at doing. I don't say that there are a lot of drugs where I'm just like, I don't need to get better at this. This drug makes me, feel like shit, and that's fine because I don't want to get better at that drug. But weed, I've always been like, there's something there with weed that I haven't yet tapped into. So for you, like, what were you doing? How are you smoking it? What was kind of your build up process of getting to the point where you're at today?
One big thing was just kind of realizing what strains worked best for me. There when you look at alcohol, there's stuff like Fireball or maybe tequila, where there's a large group of people who are like, I can never do that again. Like, I'm not a good person when I'm drinking tequila or whatever. Yeah. It's kind of the same thing with weed. There's a lot of different varieties and types, just like there's a lot of different beers and liquor and stuff. And so you kind of have to find what works best for you. And specifically, there are two main types of weed. There's indicas and sativas. Indicas are usually the things that make you like couch locked. It's very relaxed. You just kind of want to go to sleep or eat. And sativas are the more like, I kind of want to go do something. I want to talk to somebody. It's more of a head high. And so once I realized that, I stopped smoking indicas because it would just make me want to go to sleep and watch TV all day. Instead, I started smoking sativas, and that helps me be more creative and more sociable. And right now I do like vapes, like a vape pen that gives me the THC. But at the time, I was mainly just using like joints because I can very easily control how much I'm intaking. If you're smoking out of like a bong or something, it's kind of hard to gauge how much you're going to take, and it's usually going to be an amount that's going to get you smacked. Whereas a joint, you can take like one or two small puffs and feel like, a little buzz, but you're not like, whoa, dude, Yeah. So it was just a lot of trial and error. And at first, I definitely could not work on it. I was not able to concentrate enough. But after doing it quite a few times, I just naturally started learning how much I could take and be at that level.
Yeah, and LA, California in general is definitely the move in terms of being in a state.
I got a place on my street.
Yeah, I mean, a big reason why I haven't experimented more with weed is because I don't live in a state where there's a dispensary around my corner, like a bakery where I can go in and figure out exactly what I like, exactly what I don't like. I can talk to someone like a bartender who can walk me through the process and kind of get a feel for my personality. And I feel like whenever I go to Denver or when I'm in California, there's this whole experience of that's a next level that you can't get from when you're just like buying it from some dude that comes to your apartment, where you're like, okay, I smoked this exact strain and this exact amount with this exact mechanism, whether it's oil or flour or whatever. I can then imitate that exactly the next time I want to smoke. Yeah. And for me, it's been like I've had these experiences that have been some like really positive, and I'm like, fuck, like I don't even know what I smoked. Like that was such a good high. I know I smoked a joint, but like I have no idea what the fuck was in there, and I wish I had an exact map of how to get back to that same intake, same drug experience.
Yeah, I definitely say try your hand, like buy a indica and sativa if you're at a place where you can do that, and see how each affects you. and go from there. And what's nice is if you're at a place where it's legal, like in LA, the people who work there are so knowledgeable. You can just say like, hey, I want something that makes me feel creative, doesn't make me sleepy, and allows me to communicate with people, so I don't just seem like a brain dead. And they'll know what to give you, because it is messing with your brain chemistry in a way. And so there are kind of certain compounds that can target specific areas and emotions and feelings, which is really crazy. It's getting, like in LA, it kind of blew my mind coming here, where they're like, oh, this will make you feel this emotion and stuff. And I'm like, how are we getting to this point where we can start pinpointing this stuff in most people?
Yeah, this will make you text your ex within 90 minutes of smoking it.
Don't no one do that. It's a bad idea.
That's a whole nother podcast. So I wanted to get into LSD because you also mentioned offline that you had a crazy first time LSD experience. So
yeah,
what led up to that? What was the experience like? Kind of paint me a picture of how that day went down.
Yeah, so when it comes to any drug, not that I've done a lot, but I do extensive research before I take something, because I do want to know how it's going to affect me in the now, in the future. And I was always interested in the concept of LSD because from what I was told, like, your perception of reality kind of changes. And being someone who is very creative and comes up with these very abstract ideas, that sounded really interesting to me. And so after doing a lot of research, I realized that the effects are not what I was raised to think they were. I thought there was going to be like purple elephants popping in and out of space and floating around and stuff. And I realized that it's much more based in reality, even though your perception of it is kind of shifting. You're not like hallucinating things, right? And so I had a friend who said that he could get me some if I was interested. And I had another friend who had never done it before. And so we all decided, hey, let's all get together. Me and my friend who hadn't done it would take it, and my friend who had would kind of babysit us, which I highly recommend if that's something you were interested in doing. You definitely want someone who has gone through it to be there with you.
So have someone who is not on a drug that has been through it to be there with you.
Because it can be a very, very intense experience, especially your first time. And so long story short, I was interested in it. I got a hold of it after doing some research, and I actually decided to log everything that I experienced. And I actually have an 18-page Google Doc of my entire experience that I logged.
Wow. Because is there anything from that Google Doc that kind of stands out to you?
Oh, yeah. I will dive into that for sure.
100%. I'm super fascinated by any real-time LSD documenting of what went down.
Yeah, dude. So the first time I ever did it, I thought I was taking LSD, and it turned out to be research chemicals, which are very similar in terms of effects, but they're of a different compound, and they're actually more dangerous than taking LSD. LSD is actually fairly safe unless you take an absolutely absurd amount. These are a little bit less, I guess, like regulated. And so my experience was slightly different because of that. But
so it's like an imitation about LSD almost? Yeah,
kind of just like
a different synthetic alternative.
Exactly. Like a synthetic alternative that has similar effects, but it does react slightly differently.
Okay.
But man, the first things when you take LSD is like, it takes a while to kick in. It takes like about an hour. You don't really expect it, and it starts creeping up on you. You start feeling maybe a little nauseous, maybe a little like, ooh, I feel tingly. And it's not until like 45 minutes in when you start looking around and you're like, wait a minute, like my wall looks like it's breathing. and you can start seeing like almost everything kind of flows in and out a little bit, and lines start to wiggle, they start to move. As I was trying to write down in this log, like a standard notebook paper, the blue lines are like wiggling in and out, and my letters are getting all jumbled. And it got to the point where it was really hard for me to write. I had to do like voice to text. And I remember I was inside, and I walked outside, and I just went, holy shit. I was looking at the road and the grass flowing like waves, literally going like up and down and just flowing. And I knew in my mind that wasn't real. Like I was aware that this isn't reality, but I was perceiving it in this way. And it's honestly a lot for your mind to handle the first time, because you've literally just never seen that before, And so your mind's taken a second to kind of process it. And in other experiences, I've walked into a room that was a sphere. Like it literally had no corners or edges. And I was like, this does not seem right.
Yeah.
And I don't know, everything starts getting kind of enhanced. As I like looked down, I walked through a forest, and I literally took like 2 steps, but it felt like hours. And other times I walked through an entire park, and it felt like a second. And the trees felt beautiful, and I watched leaves sprout other leaves within it that were sprouting more leaves, and things started turning into fractals, and everything was just beautiful and lovely, and I felt like a kid in a playground. Just like I can start maybe morphing reality. Like I can make these trees wiggle if I think about it, or if I think the color green, it suddenly like illuminates and glows. And as I'm having this awesome kind of childlike experience, I start thinking, I miss my mom. And in that moment, all of this beautiful fun that I was having ceased to exist. And these trees that were like waving and dancing now felt like a cage that I was like locked in. And I started just crying like uncontrollably, because I just in that moment felt so alone and just empty. Like the sheer thought of just thinking I miss somebody changed my whole perception of everything. And it took me a while to kind of mentally get out of that. I literally sat down in the forest for like a full hour, just crying. And then what snapped me out of it was I saw the sunset, and I decided to leave the forest and go out to this giant hill so I could watch the sunset. And that kind of started shifting my mind. And so that started making me realize like how much your emotions really transform your perception of reality, not just in a drug-induced state, but also in real life. And that's kind of why I enjoy taking those types of psychedelics. Is I'm not taking it to have fun or to party. I'm kind of taking it to learn about myself and how I feel about certain things, because I think it allows you to almost look at situations objectively and maybe from a third-party perspective, and kind of help you work through your emotions on those things. And I think I would be wary to try it unless you were willing to deal with some pretty intense emotions and maybe even some dark thoughts or experiences you had in the past, because that may come up with a single word or just by looking at something, and that's something that you will have to deal with and go through. But I think it forces you to face it. And if you have a buddy there to help you through that, I think it can be really transformative to once you get out of that experience.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and it sounds super transformative. I've never done a full dose of psychedelics to the point where I'm I'm losing touch with reality, where it's morphing into something else. I've experimented with microdosing, and so I'm very interested in what full-blown psychedelic experiences are like, and there's a lot to unpack there. I wanted to get into the emotional aspect. So you mentioned that the openness of the trees you were experiencing shifted when you had the thought that you missed your mom. So that one emotional thought, that entrance into your mind of missing your mom, completely transformed the emotional the emotional experience from within yourself, completely transformed the visual experience that you were taking in. Everything shifted once that emotion hit you visually.
Yeah, I mean, it legitimately felt like a nice warm, orange bright forest now turned into dark cold, like desaturated. And again, these trees that at one time were like dancing and having fun were now like the bars of a cage that I was locked in. And yeah, it literally happened in a split second. There wasn't like a sudden shift. It's like I blinked and bam, my perception changed.
How did you work through that emotionally tough period of the trip? Because a lot of people experience, the bad trips. People say the worst thing that can happen to you is things turning bad or dark, and then you start to want to make things different, and then the fact that you're trying to push away the dark shit only makes them worse. How did you work through that emotionally darker moment where things start to feel like a cage, to come back to an experience that sounds like it was overwhelmingly positive? In the like, looking back on it, it sounds like a positive experience. How did you get through that darker moment to transform it back into something where you ultimately felt like at peace going through the trip as a whole?
Yeah, so one crazy thing happened to me in this moment as I'm talking about missing my mom and thinking about it. I think this was the research chemicals. I've never experienced this on LSD before, but as I'm thinking about my mom, I felt like literally her spirit came to me, and I was almost like taken to this new place. I was still in the forest, but I felt like I was in a new space, and I was communicating with the spirit of my mom, who wasn't the present day version of my mom. It was literally her like soul, her past, present, and future selves, like her essence. And it came to me in this moment that I was just sobbing and sobbing, and she told me that everything's going to be okay. And she said she wanted to show me something. And in this moment, I felt as though I experienced my entire life through her eyes, through her perspective. And I saw and I felt the love she had for me, and the laughter of watching me grow up and make stupid mistakes, and the sadness of when I yelled at her or did something that made her upset. And I had this full experience in what felt like forever, but was literally probably just a few minutes. And at the end of that, I felt so much peace because I knew that she loved me, and I got to truly witness that, at least in my perspective. And I think that, coupled with this beautiful sunset that was starting to occur, I think helped me shift the mindset a little bit and be more at peace with the situation. And then, I got to walk out of this forest with this newfound peace.
That's beautiful.
So,
that's, yeah.
It was a lot. It was so much to handle, man. And again, I think that was the research chemicals that gave me that, because I've taken LSD numerous times after that, and I've never had such a profound, like truly spiritual experience. I had at one point seen myself from the third person and watched myself move around in the third person, which was weird. But other than that, I'd never experienced anything like that.
So you feel like something in the research chemicals allowed you to tap into a more spiritual connection with your mom in particular that wasn't present during the LSD trips.
Correct. Yeah, there's definitely more of a spiritual aspect to that whole journey, especially in that moment right there. I think kind of opened my eyes to the more spiritual aspect. I think there's even a line in the log that I wrote that I felt like God sat down next to me and whispered all of the beautiful secrets of the universe to my ear and then erased my mind. And that was just kind of the level of like spirituality I was at.
God sat down next to you and whispered the secrets of the universe and then erased your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, it was profound, dude. And I think that just gave me that sense of comfort and peace. I did truly feel in that moment after all of this crying that everything's going to be okay, not just in this moment, but just in life in general. Like, things will be okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you felt like outside of the actual trip, if you felt any long-lasting sense of peace or deeper meaning, more profound understanding of some aspect of life that you wouldn't have experienced if you didn't go through that trip.
Yeah, and that's one reason I like LSD is you do remember most of the experience. And again, when you go into it not trying to party or have fun, but to try to go in it to maybe look at yourself from a neutral perspective and maybe work on some things mentally, you come out of that changed, because you can have these really transformative conversations. It's almost like your subconscious and your conscious can finally sit down and actually talk to each other and figure things out, like a therapy session. And I describe it to people as like when the drug activates, your brain gets broken up into a bunch of puzzle pieces, and you can decide how you want to like rearrange those and be changed by that when it's all concrete again.
Wow. I'm taking this in. That's a beautiful experience and a beautiful interpretation of a drug. Like the combination, it's crazy that like the introduction of a drug into someone's system can jumpstart these experiences and seeing things in a different way and producing these sort of, fractal understandings that eventually combine into something more meaningful as the trip goes on. So thank you for sharing that it's scary and beautiful at the same time. It's
very much so, man.
Yeah.
I think like I said, it's an overwhelming experience the first time you do it, but if it's something you're interested in and you're willing to face maybe some of negative thoughts and experiences, I think it's an interesting time. I won't say fun time, but I think it's informative if you go into it with that mindset, for sure.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you as we leave off, and we're coming up on the over the 2-hour mark, and I want to be conscious of your time.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, dude, it flew by. I looked down. I felt like it was 45 minutes 5 minutes ago, and I looked down. It's 2 hours and 17 minutes, and that's only a sign of an exciting conversation. And I wanted to ask you, so we've known each other for a couple years. We're friends. We've worked together professionally. Two of the through lines that I've come to know through your life are you're an extremely positive, optimistic person. You're very uplifting. Your personality, I feel like you have a very high energy when you're interacting with people, and you're also a big risk taker with your own career. You obviously dropped out of college. You moved to LA from New York. You are good at taking risks and maintaining a level of optimism, and I think that's a special combination because there are a lot of people that become jaded by risks, or they take risks and they develop, like, maybe this didn't work out, so therefore nothing is going to work out in the future, or I'm going to take this experience that was negative and extrapolate it onto the experiences I will have, and you don't seem to do that. So I want to know, for you and selfishly for myself, because I want to take risks in the future as well and remain optimistic while I'm taking those risks. Where does that combination come from? Is that something you think you were born with? Is that something your mom taught you? Is that something you've learned as a creator? How have you been able to take so many risks, much more than the average person your age, and still maintain a level of optimism and positivity and high energy?
Well, first off, I definitely didn't have that when I was a kid. I was definitely very unconfident and quiet and not a risk taker at all. I'm not exactly sure, I don't think there's one thing that I can pinpoint that just radically changed everything. But I think over time, I'm going to back up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Gavin Chops, who's a mutual friend of ours, he said something that I really resonate with, and that is, you don't need confidence, you just need courage. And the confidence will come later. After you do your courageous act, you realize that it's probably not going to be as bad as you thought it was, and you can grow more comfortable in that setting. And I think that's kind of what happened on my end is, I grew up, from my perspective, being pushed down by people almost my whole life, and then I moved to this new area where I could reform myself, and that allowed me to take these risks. And over time, I think I just became more confident in myself as a person, and more confident that, that I can make mistakes, and that's completely okay as long as I learn from them. Because I'm a very practical person, almost annoyingly so sometimes. And in my mind, it's like, if I really screw up, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to really piss somebody off. They're probably never going to want to talk to me again. But in terms of the grand scheme of my life, does that really affect anything? Usually not really. And I also knew that taking the risk of dropping out of college, or, I could just go back to college if I needed to. Moving to New York City with literally no money, just because my best friend hit me up. It's like, worst comes to worst, I'm 23 years old at the time, I'll just go back and live with my mom. And so I think allowing myself to say, listen, you're still young, you can make mistakes, and being told that by so many people growing up, so many adults are saying, you're young, do this while you're young. And I've learned that you have to listen to what older people say. You don't have to take their advice, but normally they're trying to tell you something because they wish they had done that thing. And so I really took that to heart. And again, putting myself in those experiences over and over made me more confident as a person. So these risks that I'm taking don't even feel like that much risk anymore. It's just kind of like, taking a shot in basketball. Like, you're going to get some, you're going to not get some. But when you land those 3-pointers, man, that really matters,
So it's like you can make these make these decisions, and you have confidence that in the long term, as long as you have a vision and a purpose in mind, as long as you're not drastically shifting the long-term vision, you're willing to take some setbacks or some negative consequences in the short term as, you know, byproducts of you doing what you want to do, of you fulfilling your purpose.
Yeah.
And as long as that vision, as long as you see that big picture, you have confidence in doing what you're doing and take action.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm a firm believer. I told this to all my students, like, don't say no to something if you can learn how to do it, or if there is a way that you can do it. It may be uncomfortable, you know, like moving to New York. I moved with literally $200 in my bank account by the time rent and everything was paid for. And that was super uncomfortable. But if you give yourself no opportunity but to succeed, you're going to figure it out in one way or another, or you're going to fail, and that's okay. You just have to take a step back, maybe learn what you could do better next time, and dive back in. Because as much risk as I'm taking, and as successful as I thankfully have been, there has been so many setbacks. I've lost so many jobs. I've hurt different relationships with people, and I've had to learn from those mistakes. And thankfully, I just think I'm good at applying what I've learned very, very quickly.
Yeah, no, that's great insight and great advice to say yes and then figure it out after you say yes. If someone comes to you with an opportunity and it's a skill that you can teach yourself, say yes and then figure it out on the fly and then do it the best you can.
I mean, the national TV ad that we're doing, they came to us saying like, oh, like, you guys specialize in TV ads, right? You've done this before. And we're just like, yeah, super easy. We got this. And in the back of our heads, we're like, oh my God, we have literally never done this before. This is probably the biggest project we've ever done. We have to hire crews of people. We need to get all this new stuff. Like, filming for TV is different than filming for the internet, so we have to keep that in mind. We didn't know what we were doing, but we were confident that we could learn how to do it. You know?
So this is a question I want to end off with, and there's no right answer to this. This is something that I've been thinking about for a while within podcasting and the broader spectrum of life in general, and connecting with other people. Like, why do you think we are here? What do you think is your broader purpose in the scheme of not just videography and film, but more the
kind of grand scale,
like the grand scheme, the global, why do you think you're here, and like, what do you think you were made to do, like to leave an impact? What is your ideal impact on the world, that if you fulfilled exactly what you were made to do, the world would be different in X way by the time you left? What do you think you were put here to do, beyond just the art of filmography, and more into the deeper connection of human day-to-day interaction and just life in general? And it's super broad, super general question.
Yeah. I genuinely think one of my main skills is seeing the potential in people. And I think truly, like, everybody has potential. And I think a skill of mine, and maybe a reason that I'm here, is I've realized that I when I'm one-on-one with somebody, I can be good at, like, pushing them towards their goals or dreams, or making them realize that they are capable of achieving this stuff. And so I hope that my purpose in this life is to show people how capable they are, and to teach people that it doesn't really matter where you come from or who you were in the past, that you can become whoever you want to be now. You know, I came from being a super small kind of like wimpy kid in a small country farm town to living in two of the biggest cities in the United States, like working with Grubhub and Spartan and Jason Derulo and all this stuff. And I never would have thought that was possible, and unless I had someone who told me it was, which I was thankful that I had a few people in my life who pushed me in that direction. And I'm hoping that I can help push people towards that direction as well, whether it's video or not, but to just go for it and take a shot, just try, because it frustrates me sometimes, man, because it's people I don't think realize that this is it. This is your last life, even if you, or not your last life if you believe in something else, but like, you know, even if there was an afterlife, this is your last chance on planet Earth. Do something with it. Like, take risks, take shots. You may fail, you may screw up, but you know, like, you're going to live with that regret the rest of your life if you don't. And I think that cripples people. Regret can cripple people for the rest of their life. And so yeah, I just hope I can be that beacon of positivity and encouragement to just go crush it in whatever you want.
Yeah, that reminds me of Jeff Bezos's regret minimization framework that he speaks about, where he says, what direction or what choice in my life am I going to regret the least? And he goes with that. Not maybe, you know, what will be the biggest payoff or maybe what will be the biggest benefit financially, but 50 years from now, what am I going to regret the least? Because that is the kind of the biggest stab in the gut, is regret over everything. So that's definitely a great way to put it. What you said is, you know, regret fucking sucks, and just to go for it, basically. It sounds cliche, but if you have a purpose, I believe that going for it helps you align more with that purpose, and you don't have to have everything figured out at the start, but just putting yourself out there, creating content, doing something actionable on a consistent basis will help you align more and more with what you were put here to do, and feel like you're autonomous over your life, feel like you're actually creating the life that you want rather than have it happen to you. The biggest thing I've heard from people on the podcast is, you know, the happiest people are the ones, you know, no matter how much money they make or what success level they're at, is like the ones who feel like they're autonomous over their life, and that they feel like they have the power to change their lives, and that life is not like, they're not waiting for things to happen to them or waiting for an opportunity. They're making opportunities, which has certainly been a through line of this podcast with yourself, making things happen. So thank you for taking the time to hop on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. And I know we have a great friendship and professional working relationship in front of us, and I'm looking forward to coming out to LA, coming out to the West Coast, hanging out, doing a round 3, and yeah, fucking getting after it in LA.
Yeah, dude, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I'm glad we got to catch up and talk and be a part of the podcast again. And it blew my mind when you said that we met 2 years ago. Because like, I literally remember like being on the phone call with you when you were basically deciding if you were going to hire me or not. And we connected that, you know, we lived in the same places and grew up in similar areas in Richmond and stuff. And God, it just blows my mind how far we've both come. And so I'm just super proud of you, man. Like, AUXORO, I feel like, has really gone off the ground, and you've grown a lot as a person and as a podcaster. And I'm so excited to see where that's going to lead in just the very near future, if not a few years.
I appreciate that, man. You've been a huge part of it. You know, for people may not know this if they're looking in the YouTube credits, but at Manoa Raine, he's the editor of all the remote podcasts and was the editor of all of the in-person podcasts for the past year and a half, 2 years since we've met back in early 2019. And which reminds me, where can people follow you? What's the best place for people to keep up with what you do before we leave off?
Yeah, so thankfully when you have a weird name like Manoa Raine, your every handle can be that. So, at Manoa Raine, that's ManoaRaine on pretty much any social media platform. I am trying to be better at social media. Right now, it's just so much is going on. It's hard to post frequently, but there's a lot of good stuff coming. A lot of behind the scenes with the shoots with like Jason Derulo and Grubhub and Spartan Races. So be on the lookout.
Hell yeah. At Manoa Raine, go follow that shit. Heard it here. All right.
Dude, Zach, thank you so much, man.